everyone, and welcome to After Dark, a BookTrib and Miramax Media production. Today, we are thrilled to welcome New York Times and USA Today bestselling author, Elisabeth Naughton. She's the author of 5 different series, including Firebrand, Stolen, Against All Odds, Aegis, and of course, the Eternal Guardian series. Who doesn't love that series? As well as a number of anthologies. Today, though, is release day for 1001 Dark Nights novella Unchained, which is part of the Eternal Guardian series. Happy Pub Day. Welcome, Elisabeth. Thanks so much for being on here today with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Can you bring us up to speed a little bit on the Eternal Guardian series and the characters that we're meeting in the novella Unchained?
Sure. So I think this is uh, technically book 9, if you're counting them by counting the novellas as books in the series.
Okay.
And it is centered around, instead of one of the Guardians this time, it's centered around Prometheus because he showed up in an earlier
Okay.
book. And the heroine of the book is Circe the Witch. So a
Okay.
little different than my other stories, but it includes the Eternal Guardians, so they show up in the story as well.
Exciting. So I was going to say, what kind of made Prometheus's story perfect to write for a novella?
Well, he showed up, I think it was book 6 in Bound, and part of that story was the characters going and rescuing him because he's chained to a rock by Zeus, if you know the history of the story of Prometheus. And so in this novella, he's always kind of had a story, that hasn't been told, and I kind of wanted to show what had happened after he had gotten freed. He'd been freed from that rock, and what would happen to you after you'd been chained there for so long? What would you be like? And would you be hell-bent on revenge, or would you be really kind of like introverted and just stuck inside yourself? What would he be like? So that's where the story really came from.
Oh, okay. So, as you said, with this novella, this makes about book 9. How would you kind of say the series has evolved over the years of releasing the number of books that you have?
Um, well, I think the world has gotten bigger. The Eternal Guardian series is set in 2 worlds. It's set in Earth, regular time, but they're
Okay.
also set in their own realm. So they kind of cross back and forth between where we are here and then their own separate realm. And then sometimes they go to Olympus too, which is a whole other realm and the underworld. So the world just keeps getting bigger as I add more characters in. I would say probably the hardest part for me now is that there's so many characters in this now that it's hard to keep them, um, not hard to keep them true to character, but it's hard to get everybody into every story. I have readers who have
Right.
fallen in love with the first couple of characters in the first couple of books, and they're always asking for them to show up in every book. And I just can't get everybody in every book without it making it look like I'm just trying to get everybody into every book, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So this one
Absolutely.
was a great one to bring back the hero and heroine from book 6 because the heroine in book 6, Prometheus, is her father. So it was really easy to bring those 2 back into this story, which was fun.
Definitely. Oh, that's good. I think it's always nice when storylines open up easily like that and really present themselves for that kind of writing.
Yeah, and the heroine in this story, I actually just released book 8, which was Awaken. It came out in April, and she is a character that shows up in Awaken too, so at the in parts of it. So that was really fun. Circe the Witch was in that story, so she was trapped by Zeus, and so it's fun to bring her into this as well, and it links back to the other stories that I've already written.
Definitely. So I was actually, my next question was actually going to be, can you talk a little bit about Awakened? Because it just came out in April, and for anyone maybe who hasn't gotten to that book yet, what can you tell them about it?
Well, that book, it actually jumps ahead 25 years from where I last left off in Twisted. And so in trying to think of which book it was, because yeah, I even forget. And I think it was Bound is the book which Isadora and Demetrius have a baby girl, and she is grown in Awakened. She's like 25 years old, and so she's actually the heroine of Awakened. And she gets picked by Zeus's sirens to become one of the sirens, which are like the Zeus's female warriors, and he can choose anybody he wants for that. So she gets picked for that, and she's the main character in that story. And it's a lot of that is set actually on Olympus.
Oh, okay. You okay, so you were saying that it's kind of hard to keep the characters organized. Do you kind of have an outline for how you want the series to go or who you want the next characters to be featured? Is there, or do you just kind of do it as it comes to you?
Well, I used to do it as it comes to me, but now because there's so many books and so many characters, I have like this huge
Right.
spreadsheet. And I kind of have a, basic outline of what's going to happen in the next couple of books. So that's what keeps me going at this point. But yeah, I used to do it all up here and it can't stay up there anymore.
Okay. There's too many now.
Yeah, I am also getting older, so it makes it harder to just remember everything off the top of my head.
What about maybe from all of those books? Do you have a favorite storyline that just that one just you loved it, you loved how well it came together? Is it do you have any of that within that series?
Well, I love all of them, which is obviously why I write them. But
Of
I'm
course.
kind of more drawn as a reader. I'm more drawn to the really dark characters. So, like
Okay.
Demetrius's book was one of my favorites, just because he was so dark and mysterious.
Hmm.
And Griffin's book was one of my favorites, just because he was so tortured. He was like the classic tortured hero, but really, really
Right.
tortured. I mean, he had literally been tortured in the underworld. So, um, those those kind of books with those kind of characters are really, really interesting to me, but I can't write them all the time because they're so dark that it makes it
Right.
it's really hard to stay in a dark place like that all the time. So it's a little more fun
Okay.
to write, especially some of these novellas, which are shorter stories. So like Prometheus's story was fun to write because he was tortured, but it's been 25 years, so he's not as, devastated as he could have been, like if I'd written this right after
Right.
he'd been freed. So
Right. How did you first? I'd like to talk about this because Thousand One Dark Nights is such a great organization, and the the authors that they get for all of their novellas. The novellas are so amazing. How did you first get involved with them?
I got involved because Liz Berry called me and totally fangirled on me and made me feel awesome and asked me to be part of this this series. So I was like, absolutely. I was just so flattered that she would include me with all of the huge authors that are in the 1001 Dark Nights series.
Definitely.
It's super fun and awesome to get to meet some of those other authors and to hang out with them. And I just love everybody involved. They're great.
Did you find that you spoke to any of the other authors while you were writing the novella?
Not really, because my world is so self-contained that I haven't. I
Right.
mean, yeah, no, I don't. I haven't really. I have a group that I
Okay.
group of authors that I brainstorm with all the time, so they help me out with the
Okay.
when I'm like, okay, what should happen here, and how do I get him from this
Exactly.
place to that place without, totally
Right.
screwing everything up? Because there's also the whole world that you've built and all the magic that you've built in. There's certain things you can do and you can't do.
Right.
So yeah, they keep me on track.
Absolutely. So I want to step back a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about your journey to becoming an author and how you made that decision ultimately?
Sure. I was actually a teacher before I taught middle school. I was a science teacher. And after I had my second child, I took a year's leave of absence and I spent about 3 months at home. I had two kids at the time. And I realized I was going to go insane if I didn't have something to do. So, I have a master's degree. I, was in school for a long time. I was always a voracious reader. So when I was home with the kids, I started reading, reading, reading all the time to keep my brain active.
Right.
And I just was like, hey, I could do this. So I sat down, I started writing, and I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my husband, I didn't tell
Oh,
anybody what I was doing. And he actually found one of my stories on the computer. So when I finally got up the nerve, one night we went out to dinner and I had a lot of wine, and I finally got up the nerve to tell him that I'd written something. He goes, oh, yeah, I already read that.
oh,
It
that's
wasn't
awesome.
such an amazing thing. But yeah, so I
Right.
just, after my year's leave of absence was over, I said, you know what, I'd gotten the writing bug and I decided that's what I wanted to do. So I quit my teaching job and I stayed home full time and I just wrote. And it took about 5 years before I sold my first book. And then it kind of just
Okay.
spiraled since that.
Okay. Do you does your husband now read them before as you're writing them, or when you're done with the first draft, is he kind of your sounding board?
Not really. He reads my suspense books. He really likes those. The mythology, he gets totally lost. He's read the first couple of books, and then by like the fourth one, he's like, "Wait, I can't remember who's related to who and which mythology this is linked to." And so, so he's more of
Well,
my
I guess that
suspense
means you're
reader.
doing something right, though.
Yeah.
That's great. So I know on your website you talk a little bit about it kind of being a bumpy road to becoming your own author. Can you talk a little bit maybe about some of those bumps that you hit along the way, and just for those out there who are maybe trying to work through those themselves?
Yeah, I would say I think the hardest thing to do is to be persistent, especially when you're getting rejections from
Mhm.
agents or publishing houses. Things are different nowadays because people can self-publish, but that
Right.
doesn't mean people should self-publish. I think you really should go
Right.
through and really work on craft and stuff. I mean, I'm actually really glad that self-publishing wasn't available when I first started because I look back at some of those early stories that I thought were so amazing, and if I had self-published them, I would have just, I could have killed my career right there. So,
Okay.
you know, I I am very thankful for self-publishing these days, but I'm also very thankful that I worked with publishing houses that I had. Leah Holton Schmidt was my very first editor at Dorchester when I signed the Stone books with them originally, and she really took my writing to the next level and made me see things in a different way that I don't think I would have seen
Right.
if I hadn't been with them. So, you know, it's it took a long time. It took 5 books. I wrote five full manuscripts before I sold a book. It took me 5 years. I hear that's pretty average when you look at the length of time for people, but at the time it felt like it was taking forever. And I have like stacks of rejection letters from agents um,
Mhm.
and even editors who are like, "Yeah, no, this will never sell." So
Mhm.
I would just say for anybody who's interested in writing, be persistent, learn the craft. I joined several different writers groups online, um, message
Okay.
boards and things, and we would send stories back and forth. Actually, that's how I met my critique partner, Joan Swan, who writes with Sky Jordan, who's very successful. We hooked up years ago on a chat board and have been friends since, and we've been critiquing and brainstorming with each
Oh,
other ever since.
wow.
Yeah, so that was years and years before either of us were ever published. So
Okay.
that's where I got tons of really good information from people.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. So how did you ultimately get around to picking that book, getting it published? What kind of pushed you to make sure that you stuck to your guns?
Well, I was continually entering contests too, which I think is really good. I think sometimes
Oh, okay.
if you enter contests, you get bad feedback too. But I entered, the first book I sold was Stolen Fury, and I had entered that in the Golden Heart Awards with RWA, and that finaled in 2007, I think it was. And so that was a really big for motivation for me to know that I had finaled in the
Yeah.
Golden Heart was actually really cool. So that book actually finaled there, and then it was the first book that I ever sold, and it ended up going on to final in the Ritas as well the year that it was published. So I think contests for me were a way to keep myself motivated and not get mired down in the rejections and stuff. Because anytime you final in a contest, it makes you feel like amazing when you're a newbie author.
Right.
Anytime you can
Absolutely.
get some of the, it's, what I've learned in the over the years is that it's really, really easy to get stuck in all the negative that you hear about your writing or, the negative reviews even now and stuff, or when I was learning to
Yeah.
write, the negative feedback that I would get. And so the times when you get all the positive stuff, we tend to like brush that away. You hear something good and you're like, okay,
Hmm.
well, that's the stuff we should be focusing on because that's the stuff that keeps you
Yeah,
motivated to keep going.
definitely. Okay. So what is it you think about the paranormal romance that just keeps people there's something about it that reaches people and they just clamor for more of it. What do you think it is about that everyone loves?
I think it's just so different. It's like a different world that we can't even imagine. I mean, we can't imagine it, but there's so much negative stuff in our world so many times. You watch the news and all the horrible stuff that happened in Orlando
Hmm.
last week and things you just want to get.
Hmm.
I find myself wanting to get lost in a completely different world. And
Absolutely.
and that's why I read romance too, because there's always a happy ending at the end. There's always,
Yes.
that even though awful, terrible stuff is going to happen, it's going to end well. And I think the paranormal it's just a totally different place that is so different from where we live that it's fascinating to see what happens.
Absolutely.
And I'm happy
Definitely.
to see that if paranormal really took a dip for a while. I'm happy to see that it's picking back up and people,
Hmm.
readers are excited about it again.
Yeah, absolutely. So you write both romance and paranormal romance. Is there one that you favor over the other, and are they at all similar when you go about tackling one or the other?
They are mostly because my paranormals include a lot of suspense, so and action. So the Guardian books actually have a lot of male readers who read them because there's a lot of there's a lot of sword fighting and there's lots of magic and people die and stuff that guys like to see happen. But in
Right.
my suspense books, there's also a lot of suspense that happens and mystery and action and things. So they're very similar. It's just the worlds are pretty much different. And I write the same kind of
Right.
characters in both. So if you like my characters in Paranormal, you're probably going to like them in my suspense stuff as well. And I, I have toyed with ideas with contemporary as well, but I don't. I actually wrote a proposal for a contemporary one time, and the characters were like skinny dipping in this pond, and all of a sudden a dead body floats to the top, and I thought that's just not going to work.
No.
So I'm
So
not sure about that, but
so then the answer to my next question was, are there other genres you'd like to try out? But it
yeah,
seems like you're good there.
I am. I'm pretty good. I still have this contemporary idea that just kind of like sits on my shoulder, and every once in a while
Okay.
I think about writing it. And I actually have had covers made and stuff too. So I've written like half of one, and then I get distracted because something exciting with suspense or paranormal pops back into my head, and that's
Right.
why I write that. So I don't know. It's
Absolutely.
out there. I've always had ideas for young adults too, but I mean, it's really,
Mhm.
I live with teenagers now, so I could probably write it pretty well, but my whole life is teenagers, so I'm kind of like, stay away from that.
We'll step back from that for a little while. When you write, do you step away? I know there are some authors who say, especially around deadline time, they head out, they go to maybe a hotel or something to finish up. Or are you can you finish up in the comforts of your own home?
No, not when my kids are home. And summer's going to be terrible for that because they're all going to be here. But yeah, I actually do. I have a writer friend I live in Oregon, so a writer friend of mine who lives
Okay.
in Portland, Darcy Burke. She writes contemporaries and historicals. And we don't write
Mhm.
any of the same kind of stuff, but we will
Okay.
just, like, she texted me yesterday and said, "Do you want to get away this weekend to write?" And I was like, "Yes." So we do. A lot of times, when we get away on our weekends, I can write, a quarter of a book in a weekend. And if I could do that all the time, oh my gosh, I could have books out all the time. But real life
Yeah.
does not let me do that at all. So yeah, I love getting away. I go with another group of authors every year in January. We go for like 5 or 6 days, and that's awesome. I get
Okay.
tons of words written.
Now, what about your reading patterns? How do you mix that in with writing and
I
life?
read, yeah, I actually, when I finish a book, that's when I read. So, like, when I finished, I have a new series starting with Montlake that's more of a thriller romantic suspense kind of
Mm,
thing. And the first book is called Repressed, and it comes out in the end of July. So I had just finished the second book a couple weeks ago, and I turned it in, and I think I've read probably like 15 books since I turned that in. I go on this reading spree as soon as I'm done with my own book, and I just read everything, lots of different genres, anything I get my hands on.
that's
I
amazing. Do
wish I
you
could do
have
it all the time.
any? Yeah, exactly. What's your reading list right now?
I just finished all of Brenna Aubrey's books. She has a
Okay.
book series about these. It's contemporary romance about. They're all geeks, computer geeks and gaming geeks, and I have no interest in the whole gaming thing. But I loved her books. I love her characters. And I fangirl emailed her and was like, "Oh my gosh, I
Oh,
just love them." And so she was telling me about which book's going to come out next and which character is going to get another book. So that was fun. So yeah, I read all of
nice.
hers. I just read Sawyer Bennett has a new book out. I think it's called Sugar Daddy. I just read that one. And then
Okay.
I love to go, actually went back and reread one of my favorite books, which is Perfect by Judith McNaught, which came out in like the mid 90s.
Mm,
I can read that every, couple of years and I just fall in love with it all over again.
absolutely. How do you deal with like reader criticism, whether it's Goodreads or Amazon or whatever platform it is? Do you use it as a critique? Do you use it? Does it get to you? How do you deal with that?
Um, let's see. The worst review I ever had was actually for Marked,
Oh
which is the
boy.
first book in the Eternal Guardian series. And at the
Hmm.
time, it had first come out, and it was Barnes and Noble made it free for a certain amount of time on their blog, and I picked up a
Okay.
ton of readers that way. And the worst review I ever got about that book said, "I want my money back on this free book download."
What?
After he's had a review like that, nothing else really phases me. So I usually will read a bunch of reviews when a book first comes out. Like today, I'm sure I'll go and read some of the reviews that have been posted. But after like
Right.
a week or so, I just don't even look anymore because, you'll get people who
Okay.
absolutely love it and you'll get people who absolutely hate it. Um,
Yeah.
And actually, I would rather have people love it or hate it than be in the middle 3-star, meh, this was fine kind of thing. So
Yeah,
at least if you hate it, you feel passionately about it, and
you have
who
an
knows?
opinion. Yeah.
One of my author friends wrote for Harlequin, has written for Harlequin for years, and she got a 2-star review from RT on one of her books. It's her best-selling book of all time
Oh,
because people
wow.
just, it doesn't matter. People just felt
Right.
passionately about it one way or the other, and it has sold more than anything else. So
Wow.
I don't really pay too much attention to reviews. I
Okay,
do have
good.
some readers who email me and say, "Oh, there was a typo here," and I'm like, "Yeah, there's not much I can do about that now."
Right, exactly.
But those kind of things, I'm just like, well,
What are you gonna do, right? Human error. Do you always kind of know what book is kind of coming down the pike or what you're going to be writing next? Is there like a schedule that you follow, or do you just let the more passionate ideas take form quicker than others?
I do pretty much follow schedule because I write for, I do indie publishing and I do New York publishing. So I'm on a
Okay.
schedule with my publisher for books. And in
Okay.
between those books is when I write my indie books. And so my Guardian series is now an indie series. It started off with a publisher. And then when
Okay.
Dorchester went under, I got the rights back for those books and then published them. So I can fit those books in between. So I know, like I wrote Awakened, then I wrote the second book in my new series, my Deadly Secret series with Montlake. And so right now I'm working on a new proposal for my agent. And then I'm planning to write the next Guardian book. So I kind of, I do have a schedule that I'm keeping going, hopefully for the rest of the year.
How do
Otherwise I'll get
you,
lost.
yeah, exactly. How do you kind of pick or say how long a series is going to be? Do you just kind of let it organically go on its own and when you're out of ideas, you're out? Or do you have a set number, like say for Eternal Guardians? Um, you
With
didn't
the
drop
Eternal
to
Guardians,
five or,
yeah. Actually, originally when I was writing this for the publisher, we had originally talked about 7 books for the
okay,
Guardian series because there were seven main characters in the book. And after we decided not to put a label like on we were going to call it the 7 Guardians or something. We decided not to put a
okay,
label on that because we didn't want to be boxed into if there was more than 7 books. And that's exactly what's happened. Like books 1, 2, and 3 were about three of the 7 Guardians. Book 4 was a guy who was kind of like on the fringes. It was about Orpheus, and he wasn't a Guardian. So um, after that book came out, I was like, well, I'm just going to write however many books I feel like I want to write. And that's
yeah,
been fun to do it because I try really hard to write each book so that new readers could come in and pick it up and will
mhm,
understand enough about what's happening in the world to want to go back and read the other books in the series. And so I haven't put a limit on it. I think in this series, there's an overarching plot as far as there's like an orb that holds 4 main elements that Zeus really wants because he wants to control everything. That will come to a close at some point.
okay,
I probably have like 3 or 4 more books before that'll be final. Um,
okay,
but after that, I'm not going to I can't say that'll be the end of it because like, I'd love to write a bunch of books about the sirens too. I mean, there's a whole world of
mhm,
these kick-ass female warriors that would be awesome to write about.
definitely. Definitely. That would be great. I love the idea of spin-offs, and I like it when they're successful because it gives the reader something to look forward to and the author something to look forward to writing. It's just such it works out so well usually. So I love that idea.
Yeah, I do too.
Um,
You're already in that
yeah,
world, so it's familiar and it's fun.
absolutely. So you mentioned you've got a couple of new things coming up. Is there anything that you can talk about or get anyone excited about?
Yeah, I can. Let's see. The new series that I'm writing for Montlake, it's called the Deadly Secret series. The first book is called Repressed, and it is more of a small town murder mystery kind of thing than the on the run romantic suspense I have been writing. So like the cover doesn't even have people on it. It's like a spooky looking woods with a cabin and stuff. And it is basically it's set around a family who has adopted 4 kids. Each child was adopted when they were teenagers, like 13 years old, and they all come from extremely troubled pasts. So the first guy, the book is written when he's an adult, and his background is that he spent a year in juvenile detention for this horrible, horrible crime, and then was adopted by this family afterwards. And he goes back to the same small town where he got into some severe trouble and meets the heroine who's there. So, and then of course it's a murder mystery, so there's all this stuff that happens
Right.
around them while they're just having this new relationship pop up. So It's
Absolutely.
it's different. It's very different from anything else I've written, but
Okay.
it got a great review from Kirkus. People seem to love it. My editors have loved it, so we'll see what happens with it.
Oh, well, that's exciting. We can't wait for that. I would love to get to some reader questions because we do have some here. For those listening, if you would like to submit more, feel free. But let's jump right in. Callie kind of has a similar question to what we were talking about earlier. How much time a day do you dedicate to writing? Do you have any rituals before you get started?
I should dedicate more. Let's see. I do have rituals. I like to try to work out in the morning because I tend to have high blood pressure. So if I don't work out, because I sit so much with writing that I need to get moving day to day. So I do work out in the morning. Then I try to write pretty much from like 10:30 till 3:30 or whenever I have to leave to go get kids from school and stuff. So some days I can write that whole time and I'm very productive. Other days I sit and I stare at the computer and message my writing friends and I'm like, I don't feel like writing today.
Right.
There are
Help me
days
get
when
out
it's
of my
really,
funk.
yeah, there are days when it's really flowing when you're stuck, when you're in the story and you just want to keep writing. And then there are other days where it just feels like,
Right.
you're pulling teeth to try to get
Yeah,
down 500 words. So,
absolutely. Um, Jocelyn says, where do you draw inspiration from? Do you remember the first time you wrote a love scene?
I don't, I get asked this a lot. Where do you get your ideas from? Where do you get, I don't know. I mean, I watch the news and things kind of come to me and that's really depressing because the news is really depressing. Um, I get ideas from watching other things too. Like I think some of my love for paranormal comes from some of the fantasy stuff that I love to watch. Like Lord of the Rings is like one of my very favorite movie trilogies. It's whatever.
So
And
good.
I love Game of Thrones. I mean, I love all of that. I don't think I could ever write medieval kind of stuff like that, but it really inspires me to write more of the paranormal when I watch some of those things. So,
Okay.
um, that's probably where I get some of the inspiration for that stuff. And then also I get inspiration from research. So with the mythology stuff, all the research I do on the myths, I try to keep them close to my stories, close to what happens in the myths. But for every myth you read about online, you can find like 5 different versions. So I kind of
Right.
pull from the things that I think are really interesting. And so then I get story ideas from those.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, you have a most memorable scene from this latest novella. That's from Kelly.
I do. I love the last scene in the book, which I really don't want to talk about because I don't want to give it away. But
Oh
something really
no.
awesome happens that people have been waiting for a while. Somebody gets something that he totally deserves. So that is probably one of my
Okay.
favorite scenes in the whole book. I don't think I answered that
Okay.
question about the love scene before. I
Oh
actually
yeah.
um, I don't know that I even remember writing when I wrote my first love scene. I can tell you this. When I get together with one of my writing friends, we'll meet like at a pub up in Portland and we'll write. We've had one day where we spent a whole day sitting in this pub just writing and, ordering food and drinks all day long. And I have
Right.
so much trouble writing love scenes in public. Even though nobody can see my screen, my face turns bright red and I'm like, I can't sit where anybody can see my computer.
That's great.
But no, I don't even, I'm sure the first one, my face was beet red and I didn't let anybody read it for a long time. But
That's so great. Well, on that wavelength, what is something that you consider your guilty pleasure? That's from Kate.
guilty pleasures. Mimosas. I love mimosas. I don't get to have them very often.
Mm.
um, yeah, I think, well, reading is really my guilty pleasure too now, like I said, because I just go hog wild when I finish a book and I read and
Yeah.
I love to take baths and I read. I'll like lay in the bathtub and read like a whole book. My husband's like, are you ever going to come out of there?
Yeah.
I think reading is really like, it's one of my favorite things to do and I just don't get to do it nearly as much as I want.
Well, I guess this kind of works then. How often do you reread your books? Do you reread your books? I guess is is a more broader
The only
question.
times I actually really do are series books. So like this novella that I wrote, because it deals with the characters from book 6 and Bound, I did go back and read not the whole book, but I go back and I read certain parts of it to remind myself what
Mm.
happened. Like Prometheus showed up in book 6, so oh, where was he? What did it look like? Where he was found, and how did he talk? And all those kind of things that you lose because it's been 3 books since I wrote that story. So, well, three
Right.
books, way more books in between. But yeah, I will go back. I will go back and read some of that stuff. And sometimes I'll get lost in it and I'll start reading. Oh, that's actually pretty good. I don't think I've ever come to a place where I've wished that I could have changed it, other than like, oh, there's a typo. I wish I
Okay.
could change that. But
Right.
for the most part, with the books, I spend so much time on them that I don't really get to a point where I wish I could have written it differently or written
Mhm.
something, a major twist that was different.
Well, that's good. I think that means that you wrote it the way you wanted it. Have you come across anything super interesting while researching Greek myths and stories? That's from Jocelyn.
Well, most of the stuff that I've come across, I've used because it's some of the stuff that I find really
Yeah.
interesting. Um, There are so many myths out there that I would love to touch on. There's so many, like there's the whole Medusa myth, which I haven't really done a whole lot with. I mean, I've mentioned her in a couple of stories. I've mentioned her, the poison
Right.
that was in one of the books that she used to turn people to stone, like Zeus used it to turn people to stone, I guess. There's a bunch of those kind of myths that I would love to do more of, especially the stuff with the Trojan horse and all of that. Those are things that I'd like to incorporate in, and hopefully in future books I will. But yeah, I also am fascinated with underworld stuff, so there's so many myths
Mm,
related to the underworld that I'd love to
yeah.
do more of those, and I'm hoping to because the character I'm going to write about next is pretty evil. So
Ooh, that's exciting. Is that for Eternal Guardians?
yeah, the next Eternal Guardians guy is. I'm sure most readers will figure out who I'm talking about because I kind of set him up in the end of Awakened to get the next book. So
Okay.
yeah, so
Well, I suppose that answers Laura Wilson's question of what's next for the Guardians. Um, and
if you
Kathy
haven't read
Valentine.
Awakened, you need to read that one, and then you'll know who the next
Yeah,
book is going to be about.
perfect. There you go. Kathy Valentine's asking, what's your favorite mythical story that you have read?
Oh gosh, these are all. I love the story of Orpheus going into the underworld. I love that story. I love the whole "don't look around, what you're seeing" and everything. And
Mm,
I love how he went down there to rescue someone. That's probably one of my favorites. Again, because I'm fascinated by the whole, you know, underworld and the whole, next life and
right,
all that kind of stuff. So.
absolutely. So as we kind of close out here, because unfortunately we have come to the end, I guess where will you be next that readers and fans can come out and say hi and maybe get a book signed? What are you going to any conventions? What's up next for you?
I am. I'm going to be in San Diego for the RWA convention in July. So if any of you are in Southern California, you can find me there. And I'm going to be doing the book
Yeah.
signing at the convention. So I haven't been to RWA in a couple of years, so I'm really excited. But I love San Diego.
Okay. That's
I was like,
very
oh, it's
exciting.
close. It's warm weather. It's going to be gorgeous.
Nice. Well, everyone, Unchained, the 1001 Dark Nights novella, which is in the Eternal Guardian series, is out today. So go grab it. Awakened came out 2 months ago, and you should have already read it. If you haven't, go get that too. So thank you so, so much, Elizabeth. It was so nice talking to you.
Thank you. I had a great time. I hope I answered some of people's
Absolutely.
questions. So
Definitely. Thank you so much. We appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.
bye.
Bye, everyone.